This is the training material that you'll need to look at prior to doing this so that you'll know exactly what it will take. The good thing about the SC4 is that you can take an XY panel from the SC3 and actually load the files that come off the SC3 into the SC4's Yukon, and it will import those in very nicely and lay them right in the levels that you need to put those in without having to retype inputs and outputs, names and numbers and all of that. So it takes out quite a bit of human error in having to retype your entire input and output list. So the first thing that you need to do on your system is launch the RMS software. Now this training isn't training on how to run the RMS software, but it will look something similar to this when you first bring it up. You should see a router grid just like this one. Most of the versions of the RMS had the same features that you're looking at here, unless you have one that's really, really outdated. And in that case, it'll work the same in what we're going to do. So the first thing you want to do is find out exactly how many router levels that your system uses. Router levels, like in the router screen right here, if you're using a Utah 300 or an AVS router, you will just come down to the, if you're on the Utah 300 router screen, go down to the simulator refresh enable table, press your get tables right here, and you will see how many levels up here at the top that your system uses. You probably would be familiar with this once you see this for sure, but this is how you'll realize that possibly the first level is maybe an analog or a digital video router. Second level might be also an analog or a digital router. Could be set up that way. And the other two levels might be your analog audio, left and right channels. In this case, I have 4 levels on this system, and they go out from output 0 all the way to output 95. So this is a 96 by 96 squared router. And that's how you determine the size of your router. And this will be important when you're building the SC4 tables. So first, if you don't know this, you'll need to find that out. So go and take a look at your system again, and you probably have an input and an output list of the sources and destinations that your system uses. You should know somewhere where this would be. And once you locate that, you should be able to compare that to this and know that that's how many levels you're using. Now, you may be sharing some levels between this one and the AVS router. So click on your AVS router tab, and it already brings you up to the router tables. Up here in the refresh table, if you do a get tables, it would do the same thing. You'll see how many levels that you might be talking with at this time, and then how many outputs those particular routers are currently on. Now, if you have an AVS router, then your new system, your SC4, would require what we call an MX Later unit, which is another 2-rack unit box, just like the SC4, and it will have some MX translator cards, a minimum of 1, possibly 2, installed in it, and that will also need some configuration done to it. But for the Yukon application, we would just need to set this up according to what levels you have. Most likely you have a Utah 300. That's the way most SC3s have been implemented. So that's the first step. The next thing you want to do is go down to the lower left section here and click on the panels button. Now you need to determine what type of control panels you're currently using. And the only way that you can use this import feature from the SC3's tables into the SC4 is if you have a full matrix control panel. It's the best way. If you have a panel that has all of the inputs, you could import at least the inputs. But if you want to do the entire system, you'll need an XY control panel, if possible. And there's 2 types of panels. You've got an SCP panel type or a CSP panel type. You can import either one of these types of panels. If you have an SCP panel type, go to the SCP panels, go down here to the lower section and click on the Source Mnemonics tab. Type in the number here for the address of the control panel that has a full list of inputs, and then press the Get Tables. At that point, you should see all of this populate with the levels that you found out that you have, and all of the inputs and their names. over here on the left side. Okay, you'll do the same thing for the destination tab. So go to the destinations, make sure the number of the XY panels in here, press the get table. If you don't have an XY panel, then the output table may not work for you. You might have to hand type that using the training videos that we've already gone over on installing your own input and output list. If you have an XY, that'd be the best thing. Perform a get table and you should see the files here. Once you get the destinations and the sources loaded onto the screen here, you're going to then press the Save File button. And what you should see is a dialog box appear with wanting a name, so type in any file name that you want to use. I just call mine XY destinations, and it will automatically place the extension of a .udm for the destinations for an SCP style panel, and USM for the sources of an SCP control panel. And just give them names and a location where you know where you can go and retrieve those. Okay, now I have a CSP table that I'm going to demonstrate. That's why I have not brought anything up on the screen here, but it will look similar to this if you do have an SCP panel. So if you have CSP panels, go ahead and press the CSP panel button. In your sources and destination tabs, it works exactly the same way. You don't need to worry about the group names because those already get brought in from just the sources and destinations that we import. Once you get to this screen and press the panel number up here on the CSPs for the XY or the panel that has a full source list, press the Get Table button. It will then populate the screen with the 4 levels, in my case, that I had looked at in my router levels. So I had a 4-level system, and sure enough, I have them all listed here. Now it only shows 64 in this particular mapping. Evidently, I don't have another 32 that I need to worry about. But regardless, this is my inputs, and I would press the Save File, and this one would come up with a default name of PL data. I used the XY sources just to call it XY sources and XY destinations. It is a .psn if you have a CSP panel, and for the destinations it would be a .pdn. So save both of those. After you do a get table, it will retrieve it from the panel, save it, and this one will be called a .pdn. Save it to the location that you want to use it in, and then you'll be ready to go and edit those tables and then import them into the SC4. And that completes this portion of the SC3, so we can actually move this off the screen again, so I don't need that. And you can close yours if you're using it. Okay, the next thing that you want to do is to actually grab the files that you just saved and place them in an editor. You can open those in WordPad. That works out just fine. And mine happened to be loaded in a folder called SC3 files on my desktop. So I've already opened that folder, and here are my 2 files that I had saved. Now you can open these just using WordPad, or you can place them in an editor if you have one. You can edit text files, and then double click it, look at it, put it in your editor, and you're going to see the text file that has been laid in here. Now yours will have level names across the top. I've already edited mine, but you want it to end up looking similar to this, so that all you have in here is a 1 through 8 across the top. You're going to see all of your sources and the levels columns inside of this table. You'll also see some erroneous inputs, probably called PL lock or B lock for bus lock, some custom status that may be in there. You need to eliminate all of that and just remove them out of here. It will import those into the SC4 tables, but you'll have to just delete them over there if you prefer that. I like to clean it up here on this side before I import it. So you've got the file saved. Maybe make a copy of it in case you need to go back and get it again if you corrupt this or anything. But then edit this so that it looks clean with 4 columns of data, or I'm sorry, 8 columns of data that will have your information in it. Get rid of any erroneous names that don't fit your system, and you'll know those, but also custom status. Well, actually, if you leave the custom status in there, the newer version here of Yukon may just bring that in. So leave them in and you can delete them later. and open the PSN file, which is the sources, and do the same thing. If you see any kind of stuff like this word off down here, you can leave that in there if you'd like, but it's going to show up in the input list and not in the custom status table. So I would delete those out of here if you know their custom status. If you don't, then it really doesn't matter, because you'll see it in your source list and it won't make sense, or it will make sense and you can use it. But as you notice, I've already got a black up here that's a real source. This would be considered a custom status if you're familiar with that in the SC3 world. It works differently in the SC4. But see my bars and my tone, these are already existent up here as TS1 and black, and those are just custom sources for that. So they won't make a whole lot of sense, but you'll see what I mean here in just a moment. So the next thing we do is go ahead and edit those and then close those files in the same location that you want to retrieve those from. Now, once these files have been edited by you, the next step would be to import those into the SC4. But first, we have to go into the SC4 and create the mapping tables. Now, before we do that, open up the folder that you've placed your files in, and actually, I think what you need to do is make sure that there are no spaces in between the name for this to work properly. So I'm just going to take the space out of both of these names, call mine XY sources and XY destinations, leave that saved. Then go ahead and launch Yukon. Wherever you have that saved on the desktop or in your favorite location, open up the folder that has the UCN file in there and bring in your current SC4. If you actually, if you do have an SC4, you can still use these SC already created, which you wouldn't have this XY panel on here. I keep forgetting where we're at with this because your system, if you have an SC3, then you wouldn't have the SC4 yet, and you'd have to be starting from scratch. However, you may already have one of these created because of a previous training video that you watched on how to set up mapping tables and get all that loaded in here properly. What I'm going to do is go ahead and let's go ahead and make sure I save this. And I'm going to start a brand new. I'm going to just close this and let's start a brand new application, and we'll save this in a different location so that I don't mess up my original work. Okay, you double click on that Yukon icon, you're going to get a blank screen here, and you should be able to at this point actually have so if this is a brand new SC4, you'll start from scratch and watch those earlier training videos on how to get to this point of creating an SC4 in your system, and then we can actually do the import. So I'm going to build one of these again. This will be more for a recap if you've already watched it, but we'll left click on our SC4, add it to the system. I'm going to call this just a test one again. So this will be a test SC4. I'm going to say OK there. Then you're going to right click on this particular icon and then go into the mapping tables, and they're going to actually be blank when you go in here. So maximum inputs and outputs from my system showed that I was a 96 by 96 system. So this is good. Or actually, if this is if these are Utah 300 routers, make this the number of the largest router of those four. So if it's a 128 capable, which if it's got 96 in there, then it would definitely be capable of doing and 128 outputs. So go ahead and put 128 by 128 in here. If that's the size it will grow to. The max levels that changes on its own. The party line values here, this is if you have party line control panels. In my case, I do. So I'd put the maximum number in here again, which is 128. And let's say I have 10 control panels. I'll put a 10 in here, 10 or less. Okay, then I'm going to add my router levels. I have 4 levels. I'm just going to call them level 1, I'm just going to call them level 1 through level 4. So the router type, let's say my first one was a digital video. The router model happened to be a 300 and it's level 1. And again, the training videos prior to this will show all of these details. So level 2, this is a, let's say that this one happens to be an analog video router, and we'll make that a Utah 300, and it happened to be level 1. Okay, the next router was an, I will call it level 3. It is an analog audio, and the router model was a 300, and it was a level 2. That's the third level. And the fourth one we'll add is level 4. Router type was also analog audio, Utah 300, and it's a 3. Okay, with those 4 levels in there, I can now add my virtual levels down below, and I'm just going to call them the same thing, level 1, level type, it was a digital video, router name, and we picked from the levels above, and that's level 1, and we'll put OK. Level 2, the level type is going to be an analog video, scroll through those. Router name, this will actually be the drop down list to level 2. I'm going to marry these up to match the levels above. Level 3, now this one's actually analog audio left, and that does matter with a Utah 300 router, and that's the third level. And the last one is level 4, and it is an analog audio right, and that does matter if it's a 300. And the router name is level 4. Okay, now we're ready to import these. So we're going to save this, click OK. You'll notice that your source and destination table now have 4 levels that I've just named in there. And the way that this works is you're going to come up here to the file. You're going to come down to where it says load RMS device list. And then what it does is, if you notice up here into the file name, it's the 4 that I described from the RMS. So the PDN and PSN are the CSP panels, USM and UDM are the SCP panels. Okay, I've got to go and search for mine. I'm not sure exactly where. It's right here, I believe, on the desktop. Actually, no, I have that in the C drive under USI SC3 files. And here you'll see the PSN and the PDN that I have saved. Now, let's just load the sources first. You have to make sure that you're in the system screen and not opened in the sources and destinations when you do this. It's very important. If you're inside of there, it won't open, and you'll wonder all day long what's going on. Do this from the system screen. It will then place them in there. Then you can go look at it. You have to do them individually, one at a time. So PSNs will go first. Then I'll go back to File, Load RMS Device List again. I'll do my PDN. Click OK. Now if I go and look at my sources and my destinations, voila, they are all laid in here very nicely in the same order that they were inside of that file that we were looking at. Now if you scroll down through here, if you want to check for duplicates, you can do one of 2 things. You can actually verify it down here, or just left click on any given level and you'll see your duplicates in here. And that tells me right there that we actually have a custom name called off for this that we used to have. That will not work in this table like this. So you'll walk through these and just delete them out. Here's another one, bars and tones. So both of those are not going to work. And you'll delete both of those out of there. And then you can just scroll down through here and make sure that there are no other duplicates. Do that level by level if you'd like. When you're finished, you simply click OK. Check your destinations out. Make sure that those are all. Destinations generally don't have duplicates anyhow. But if you want to do a check this way, you can. Another thing that I would recommend is that you walk down name by name here and make sure that it imported everything properly. It saves a lot of time checking it this way. I have not ran into an issue with this yet, but you never know. So I would double check it myself before I started using it. It does save a lot more time than having to hand enter every one of these. So you can see there's a lot of inputs and a lot of outputs that you would be doing manually through a list with a lot of errors that would probably come up and happen in your system. When you're finished, press OK on both of those screens. You're back to the system screen. At that point, you would right-click on your SC4 and program it, and that will send it into the SC4. Before you program it, though, make sure again that your setup transfer parameters show the PC address at the mount point and that your NFS server is running, or you'll get an error and it won't work, and the program tab will not show any status, but you'll get an error down here. Now, your system wouldn't have a red box around this when you go to program it. Mine does because it's just a demo and I'm not hooked up to a real SC4 as we did this. And you may not be either. You may just bring that SC4 on the screen by naming it like I did. You may actually hook it up and just drag it on from down here also. Either way will work. And you'll see that from an earlier training video. Once you're finished here, you can then start populating this with control panels. Adding the panels onto the screen one by one. You can call them whatever you want. This could be panel 1. No, we can't have any spaces, so I can do a panel number 1. Say OK. And then that particular panel is the panel that you would want to choose out of here. Maybe panel 1 is my CSP16160. That would place it on the screen. And then you would go ahead and add your inputs and outputs to this particular panel. Now, that is going to be covered in a different training session other than this. So at this point, we have completed how to load your RMS files into an SC4 mapping table and get going directly from there.